when I set out on my bicycle this morning, which is, by the way, a 1996 stump jumper, if anyone cares. But awesome. It was a trade me purchase, so that I didn't have to go buy a new bicycle. That here was a discarded one that I could use. I thought.
Yeah.
I have to say that when I first came here, I was thinking, oh, sustainability. It's like riding a bicycle and wrapping my food in something other than plastic. I thought about sustainability in those sort of concrete terms of not wasting. But then some of the things that we try to help our students to learn is the interrelationship between stuff, whether it be between cultures or communities. One very interesting model of health that we talked about in our first year class was the One Health model. And that's a model that's used by particularly veterinary scientists and veterinary doctors, as they talk about the relationship of animals to human health. And so everyone knows that a dog makes you feel happy, you can pat his head and he's not going to judge you. But thinking about the relationship between, say, animals and disease, vectors, they carry diseases that we can catch, or the relationship of the animal to the land, and does industrial farming create pollutants that contaminate our water, and yet we still want to drink milk. And so we have all these circular relationships between the land that we live on, the animals that occupy it with us, the food that we eat, the companions we have. And that to me is a really direct example of how health and well-being and sustainability are really closely linked.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've seen one definition of sustainability that says that sustainability is meeting the needs of the current generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs.
Oh, interesting.
Which I thought was really interesting, and I think kind of ties into your point as well about, thinking really critically about the things that we are producing, the number of cows that we are farming, whether we need this now, and how future generations will have access to similar things.
And I guess sustainability, there's an awful lot of finger pointing at the individual, and yet wholesome nutrition, ability to exercise, and ability to look after your children and make sure they can play is part of what we need to ensure is possible.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've never really thought about that in terms of the health and well-being side of individual responsibility. But in sustainability, we often hear that it's these big corporations who are ruining the world, and supermarkets are throwing away so much food, and how dare they? But we really try to turn the conversation back to the individual in terms of sustainability and say, well, yes, supermarkets might waste some food. Maybe they do throw out a bag of tomatoes when there's only one that's gone bad. But we know that households in New Zealand waste huge amounts of food. 3 shopping trolleys for every household in New Zealand is just going out the window. Kaibosh is New Zealand's first food rescue organization. So Kaibosh, we take quality surplus food from supermarkets or other food distribution producers and things, and distribute it to community groups who work with people in need. So most of the food otherwise would have probably gone to landfill, and we really emphasize the quality surplus food. So it's not, things that are past their best before date. It's not all the bruised apples. It's things that are really genuinely beautiful, but there just happen to be too many of them. Sometimes it's those food delivery organizations, and they just have over-ordered for the week, and they've done all their deliveries, and then they give all the surplus to Kaibosh. Other times it might be a bag of tomatoes from a supermarket, and one has gone bad, but the rest are perfectly beautiful. And so that whole bag will come to us, and we have a huge crew of about 200 volunteers who do all the food sorting. Yeah, and so they will pull out the one bad tomato, and then the rest.
And they use the others.
Yep. And the rest.
Do you know how I know? I know Kaibosh because I'm a gardener, and I can't make gardening work properly because I always have way too much of something. Yeah. And then we have broccoli every day of the week for a week, and because because we can, all my excess garden food goes to Kaibosh or to the night shelter.
Awesome.
In terms of thinking sustainably, one of the big issues in my area, of course, is the equitable, distribution of food, and yet at the same time, the relationship between food and well-being. And then the third factor, which is this association of food or this sort of magical association of food with all aspects of health. So this idea that you should be able to control what you eat, that you should be able to lose weight, that it's all in your hands, when what we've been talking about before shows really it isn't, because if you haven't learned how to cook or to eat good foods because mom and dad have to work 3 jobs and the cheap food is the sugary, fatty food, well then how do you learn and propagate that? And what's more, it may be outside of your control. So I've often thought, if I only had $2 and I had hungry children, would I buy carrots or would I buy chips? What would you do?
Oh gosh, I don't know. And luckily, I've never been in that situation.
Well, me either, because I've got privilege, but I would say I'd go for the chips.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, carrots don't fill your stomach. They're good for you. They're crunchy. They get stuck in your
kids
teeth.
aren't going to be happy.
But they're not going to be happy. And if I only had $2, I'd go for high caloric, high fat food that would sate me. Yeah.
Well, it does seem astounding that any children in New Zealand might go to school hungry.
I know. Oh, it's when I think of all the spinach I have in my garden that just grows there ready to be picked.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there are some wonderful examples of community gardens and gardens in schools. And there's an organization at Upper Hutt called Common Unity Project, and they are doing beekeeping in schools as well.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And I think that services like that are so valuable to get kids really early and give them both a sense of ownership in the food that they are producing, which I think will hopefully will stay with them through their lives, and a more personal relationship with food, that it doesn't just come from a supermarket in a very disembodied, very distant way, but that they can actually watch it grow and develop through their own love and care.
So we're talking about the gardens, and one of the things that I think, and some of this is emotive as opposed to exquisitely well informed, but one of the things that worries me about the large-scale production as opposed to our small gardens is, of course, the amount of chemical required for large-scale farming. And I know that we are still using chemical products in New Zealand which have been banned in the European Union. And I know from my summer work in the country that there is a huge amount of chemical being applied to the fields in which our animals graze and to the food that our animals will eat. And while I can't say that all chemicals are bad, of course many are totally necessary, the health of our agricultural workforce also needs to be preserved, and the large-scale exposure to the chemicals, which perhaps are not dangerous to us at a individual level, still puts that workforce at risk as well. So it's one of my sources of concern about the large scale is, are we making sure our farmers are well informed as opposed to informed by the commercial interests that produce these chemicals, and making sure that our workforce is safe and that we're safe in the products we eat.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I saw that was one of the targets under this particular sustainable development goal, good health and well-being, was limiting toxins in air, soil, and water, which is obviously quite a good idea. But I was really surprised at how wide and broad the good health and well-being sustainable development goal targets were, from, toxins and chemicals in our soil, air, and water, to limiting car accidents, to drug and alcohol abuse. Is so wide-ranging, and I hadn't really considered all those different aspects of good health and well-being. And that's why, going back to what we can do as individuals in terms of sustainability, I really try to focus on the positive and the proactive things, like, buying the organic thing. It might be 10 cents more expensive, but if you can afford to support the organic farms, or to support even your local farmers market. Yeah, absolutely. Which, more of your money is going directly to the farmers, less to the supermarkets, the giant supermarket chains. And it's likely to have been produced a lot more closer to where you live. So in that way, you're reducing the transport costs. So just the little proactive things that everyone can do to help further a more sustainable future.
Oh, listen, the thing that I'm doing today to support sustainability is I'm getting on my beautiful bicycle.
Yeah.
And I'm achieving two things by that, or I'm achieving so many things. So many things.
Yeah.
Not only am I taking a car off the road, I'm not even taking public transportation. I'm setting an example as well for other people to see that a woman of my age and stature, so I'm not this big strong person, I'm just a person, can bike up to the top of kōrero, of course. Why don't you try it?
Yeah.
I'm also gaining in health and well-being as I do so. Because of course I'm getting my heart rate up. I'm not paying a gym membership. I can do it on my own.
Yeah.
And what's more, I can get myself into nature and remind myself of its beauty.
It's awesome. Biking everywhere.
Nice.